Hello, and welcome to the Bamboo Lab podcast with your host, peak performance coach, Brian Bosley. Are you stuck on the hamster wheel of life, spinning and spinning, but not really moving forward? Are you ready to jump off and soar? Are you finally ready to sculpt your life? If so, you've landed in the right place. This podcast is created and broadcast just for you. All of you strivers, thrivers, and survivors out there. If you'd like to learn more about Brian and the Bamboo Lab, feel free to reach out to explore your true peak level at www.bamboolab3.com.
Welcome to the show, everyone. As always, I'm your host, Brian Bosley. And today we have an amazing episode with a very distinguished guest. And I've been very excited to have him on here over the past month or so as we've been conversing. But before we do, I want to read a heart letter that we received regarding the Amman Catalan episode we did a few weeks ago. And this came from a Bamboo Lab subscriber. He said, I talked with my godfather on Sunday who listened. His first question was, what is a podcast? I love that question, by the way. He had never heard one before. He then shared his key takeaways and shared how much he liked the interview. He's a Vietnam veteran, so the veteran connection was very powerful and impactful for him. And that's what I love about this podcast, but a lot of podcasts is bringing amazing guests on, letting them share their experience and their wisdom and make connections with people around the world who can actually listen in and observe and learn and be inspired by them. So that was very powerful. I also want to welcome the new listeners from the country of Singapore. Welcome aboard, everyone, to the Bamboo Lab. You are our 60th country to join in, and we're just very, very honored to have you. So everybody out there, thank you for this, all of the hitting the like button. Thank you for rating, reviewing us, and sharing us each week with 3 people. You are the reason this podcast is growing so immensely across the planet. So, all right, one last thing. This episode is dedicated to a friend of the podcast and to a dear friend of mine. He's out there fighting the good fight this week. Jack, I just want you to know that we're all behind you. We all love you. We all support you. And remember, don't wait. You kick that demon's ass. All right. Before I make the official announcement, welcome our guest today, I want to read his bio. And before we do, in the show notes today, folks, please get down there and hit the links I'm going to include about our guest, because his research and his experience and wisdom and what he has to say is highly impactful, and it's so well documented. Please click on the links below and do some exploration. I had to search to find a bio that would actually fit in the time frame of this podcast because he's got so much credentials and credibility. Today we have Professor Jay Olshansky on the podcast. Professor Olshansky received his PhD in sociology at the University of Chicago in 1984. He is a professor in the School of Public Health at the University of Illinois at Chicago, research associate at the Center on Aging at the University of Chicago, and the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. And he's chief scientist at Lapitus Solutions, a company he has actually co-founded. The focus of his research is on the estimates of the upper limits to human longevity, something extremely important to all of us, not just now, but well into our future and well into our heritage. Exploring the health and public policy implications associated with individual and population aging, forecasts of the size, survival, and age structure of the population, pursuit of the scientific means to slow aging in people, the longevity evidence, and we'll talk about that today, and the global implications of the reemergence of infectious and parasitic diseases. During the past 35 plus years, Dr. Olshansky has been working with his colleagues in the biological sciences to develop the modern biodemographic paradigm of mortality, an effort to understand the biological nature of the survival and dying out processes of living organisms. He is the author and co-author of many books and so much research, but just to note a couple of them here. One is The Quest for Immortality, The Science and Frontiers of Aging, A Measured Breadth of Life, and he's co-editor of Aging, The Longevity Dividend. His recent work is focused on linking the scientific study of aging with investments in longevity and mortality-related products. There's more, folks. Trust me, it was hard to get his credentials down to this little bit. He's on the board of directors at the American Federation for Aging Research and the board of scientific advisors at PepsiCo. He's also been the recipient of many awards, including the Donald P. Kent Award from the Gerontology Society of America, the Irving S. Wright Award from the American Federation for Aging Research, Next Avenue Influencer in Aging Award. He also has received the Alvar Svanborg Award and the Glenn Award from the Glenn Foundation for Medical Research in 2018. Woo! This guy's got a lot to say, but he's done a lot of work in his life. So I'm so proud and honored to welcome my new friend, Professor Jay Olshansky. Welcome to the Bamboo Lab podcast, and thanks for coming aboard.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, you are more than welcome. First of all, how is the air quality in Chicago today?
I'm breathing in chunks of air as we speak. So it's horrible. It looks like fog. But and the irony is that I'm sitting outside, so I am taking a risk, but I'd rather be outside than inside today.
I hear you. I actually, my better half left for work today, and she had a slight asthma issue on the way to work. And my son, we're in Lansing, Michigan right now, Jay, and my son lives in the summer, he does landscaping outside in Grand Rapids. And yesterday they had the worst air quality in the country, I believe Grand Rapids did. And I called him. He's like, "No, I didn't really notice too much." I'm like, "Dude," and he has asthma, but he's got a very slight form of asthma. But he's toughing it out. And we told him, make sure you have those puffers with you.
Yeah, I hope it's not the new norm.
Oh, let's hope not. Knock on wood. Knock on wood. Well, I've done so much research on you, Jay. In fact, I think I've done more research on you than I have any of the prior guests on the podcast. But so I know the tip of the iceberg. So can you share with us a little bit about who you are? If you want to share where you were born, childhood, anything like that. But really, I want to learn also what inspired you to get into this fascinating field.
Yeah. So I grew up in Detroit. I went to Michigan State University as an undergraduate, and I went to the University of Chicago as a graduate student. I spent most of my early years in Detroit. Moved to Salt Lake City as an assistant professor in the early 1980s, which is when I graduated. Then I came to graduate school at the University of Chicago, believe it or not, with an interest in adolescent fertility. Why children are having children. And I was advised by my advisor to take a course from this well-known research scientist by the name of Bernice Newgarden. She was a well-known researcher in the field of aging, and I don't think she was going to be at the university much longer. So he said, "Yeah, you may want to take a class from her." And I'm sitting in the class. I was 24 years old. I knew absolutely nothing, by the way, at 24, and I didn't know that I knew nothing, but I discovered it pretty quickly. So I'm in this classroom, and Bernice discovered that I had an interest in demography. What happens to populations across time. And she said she had just finished a book on, bringing together scientists trying to address the question of whether or not the government, U.S. government, should be in the business of trying to make us live longer, of extending life by slowing aging. And she said, "Why don't you take a look at it?" And she said, "I'd like you to write a paper on the demographic consequences if we succeed in slowing aging." And I swear I did not leave the library for like 3 years. I don't actually remember eating food, doing anything. I became completely obsessed with this question of how long humans are capable of living, and then whether or not there's anything we can do about it and how much. And she asked me to turn it into a master's thesis, which I did. I then turned it into a doctoral dissertation, where I linked up with quite a nice group of researchers at the University of Chicago who served as my thesis advisors. They were very encouraging. I then took my first job at Argonne National Laboratory doing work unrelated to aging. But eventually I applied for a grant to the National Institute on Aging to essentially go back to school. This was in my 30s. And I went back to school and retrained in molecular and evolution biology and genetics so that I could learn about the various forces that influence how long we are capable of living. That gave birth to a new field of science, which my colleague and I created, called biodemography in the early 1990s. And that's all we zero in on explaining why it is that we live as long as we do and what we can do about it. It ultimately led to a debate in the world of science about the upper limits to human longevity, which I assume we're going to get into. And ever since then, I've been digging deeper and deeper into this question. And I can say that there have been quite a few advances that have occurred just within the last 5 years or so that allow us to not only explain more of where we are and where we're headed, but what we can and what we cannot do. And it's highly controversial because there's a lot of people out there with a vested interest in the suggestion that we could constantly manufacture survival time and make us live longer and longer. And I have a different view. So that's my summary, by the way.
I love it. I mean, at 24 to become fascinated with longevity, though. At 24, I wasn't even thinking about longevity. I was just trying to get my career started and raise a daughter. I have a question. This has come up several times in the research I've done on you with this lifespan bet you have with the biologist. I think, is it Stephen Ostad?
Yes. Yeah.
And the funny thing is, when I read it, well, you'll get into it here, but when you guys were talking about what you would put down in the bet, I'm thinking, well, that's not a lot of money. But then I realized, okay, that's going to grow over, generations potentially. And somebody's going to walk away with maybe not worth a ton of money then, but it's going to be worth a lot of money in present day dollars. So can you share a little bit about that? Because I think it's a great story.
Yeah. So this actually was one of the more meaningful bets in the world of science, which ultimately led to a website called Long Bets. I remember talking to the editor of Wired magazine about this, and he liked the idea so much that he created Long Bets. If you go online and you look up longbets.com, the origin of that is the bet I'm about to describe. So back in, I think it was 1999 or 2000, there were stories in, I think it was in Time magazine, might have been in Life, wherever it was in some magazine, where my good friend Steve Ostad, who's a biologist, was suggesting it's possible that somebody alive today could live to 150. And I called him up. I read the story. I called him up. I said, come on, Steve, you don't really believe that, do you? Just for the audience, just so you know, the current world record for human longevity is 122. It was a woman who died in 1997 at a little over 122. She lived in southern France. She smoked for 100 years, by the way. And just for the young people that may be listening, that is not a license to start smoking, because most people that do will die earlier, but there was something special about her. So the difference between 122 and 150 is like light years in our world of aging and longevity. So the prospect of somebody actually living that long is extremely remote. And of course, no one has even come close to 122 since then. So I said to Steve, are you willing to put a little money behind your... Right, why don't we do this? Why don't we each put $150 down? And 150, by the way, is obviously associated with the longevity of the person that he's claiming can live that long. Let's put it down. Each put $150 down, so $300 down. Put it into an account. Let it accrue interest for the next 150 years. And if anyone alive in the year 2000 is alive in the year 2150, then all of the money and all of the interest goes to Steve's relatives. If no one alive in the year 2000 if folks alive in the year 2000 don't make it to 2150, if there's no survivors, then all of the money goes to my relatives. Now, you might think it doesn't sound like a lot of money, but actually we doubled the bet several years later. That was covered in Nature magazine. It was covered in Science, the story about this. And of course, I will reveal to you what I invested it in, which is one of the reasons why it's going to be worth over $1 billion. So when I first got the money, I put it into gold. At that time you could buy gold, and it was inexpensive. It was like $500 or $600 an ounce. So I bought these gold coins. I sold them at about double. I then put it into Tesla, and Tesla went way up. So we made a fortune on the initial investment. So if you start accruing interest in that amount and remember, it doubles relatively quickly. After 150 years, you've got over $1 billion. So this is called the $1 billion bet. And it's not really, I mean, look, Steve and I both realize neither of us are going to be here in 2150. But someone will be, and we're assuming somebody from the National Academy of Sciences or AAAS will administer the money to my relatives once I win the bet, which is the way I always say it. And I always thank Steve for helping to ensure the reproductive success of my offspring by contributing $1 billion to them. But this bet is it's part serious and part not. It's really designed to get people to think about and discuss how long we can live. And this idea of 150 is so far out of the realm of anything that we've seen that I see no evidence to support it whatsoever. Steve will argue that there's lots of developments that are about to occur or have already occurred in the world of aging science that lead him to believe that somebody can make it, and that these interventions are going to come online pretty soon.
Well, and that's the thing I hear a lot, Jay, is I hear so many people, just in conversation that I have with, fairly educated friends of mine, and they say, we're going to be living to 200 the next generation, 2 generations from now, we'll be living to 200. I'm like, well, that's great. I mean, I guess it's great if we're living, not just living long, but we're living wide lives too, and being able to function properly. But there's really no scientific evidence at this point to show that we're going to be living to 200 in the next couple of generations, it sounds like.
No, of course not. I mean, look, the rule is fairly simple. Anyone who comes up with a number higher than 122, is making it up. In the world of science, we're not supposed to be making up numbers. So if somebody, look, let me give you an example. Several years ago, I published a chapter in a book from a colleague of mine. The title of the chapter was "Why Do Anti-Aging Doctors Die?" And these are people that have been around for a long time, hundreds of years, many of whom have claimed that they found the secret to the fountain of youth, and they know what it is, and they're taking it or doing whatever it is that they think is going to make them live for, 200 years. Some people, they can live for 500 or 1,000 years. They all died, and they all die from the same causes as everyone else at about the same age. So there's a lot of hype. There's a lot of misinformation about human aging and longevity. The first chapter of my book, The Quest for Immortality, is devoted to the history of thinking on this concept of pro-longevity, the idea that we can manufacture survival time indefinitely. And if you get a chance, I look at that, because some of the stories of what people used to claim is absolutely remarkable. I can actually tell you that the origin of modern chemistry originated with the origin of alchemy. Alchemy, centuries ago, was developed for the purpose of transmuting lead into gold. Why did anyone want lead to be transmuted into gold? The value of gold was thought to be the property of immortality. If you drink your wine or your water or whatever it is, pretty sure it was wine back then, in a gold cup, you would ingest minute quantities of the gold from the cup and acquire the properties of immortality associated with the gold. So some of our modern science is attributed to these ancient efforts to try to alter how long we're capable of living. So when somebody, I hear it all the time, people coming up with these ridiculous estimates of longevity, and they all think that they're going to live to 120, 150. They're all made up numbers. They won't make it. And perhaps they may not want to make it unless we be assured that the quality of the life accompanies the length of life. Because the last thing anyone wants is to make it out to extreme old age with either the mind not functioning or the body not functioning. It does happen. It happens often that you get a mismatch between the two. When you get a match and they both make it out, it's pretty wondrous to see. People who are centenarians or even supercentenarians past 110, and they're doing okay. That's wonderful to see, but it's exceedingly rare.
Well, and that's something I've always said. I always tell them when I'm talking to clients, or even say to myself or friends and family, is like, don't just live long, live wide. Be able to, that's when your more professional way of saying is quality and quantity of life. And I do think that, after I had spoken with you last week or 2 weeks ago, I was doing a talk with a company out in Spokane, Washington, on renting your life versus owning your life, and how we live kind of this life of like we rent it from other people. And I said, just think, if people who rent their lives, they hate their jobs, they hate their lives, and they live for the weekend and they don't have any quality of life. I said, what if we did live to 150 or 130 and we were working 90 years of that, and, or 70 years or 80 years? I said, and if you hated your life and you had a poor quality of life, I said, can you imagine the level of depression and anxiety and all the things that would escalate? Because now you're living longer, but you're not really truly being able to enjoy your life. You're just living more years of quiet desperation or pain, whether it's physical, emotional, or intellectual pain. So anyway, it's a little bit off the subject, but after we had talked a little bit over the phone, I started thinking, my gosh, I wonder if it, is living longer really the ultimate pursuit? And then I watched your National Geographic special that you were spotlighted in. And I'm like, yeah, there's a lot of, I see what they're saying now. It's not just living longer. Quantity is one thing, but quality of life is equally, if not more important.
Yeah. I mean, it's a message. Be careful what you wish for. You don't really want that longer life unless it's accompanied by good health. And that's really what science is all about now, is trying to figure out a way to enhance and extend the quality of our lives as we get older, because many of the things that go wrong with us are not our fault. It's a consequence of operating these bodies, which I call living machines, beyond what I refer to as their biological warranty period. It's like a warranty period on your car. When you operate it beyond the end of the time period when it's supposed to be used, things start to go wrong. And it's no surprise that in the modern world we see heart disease, cancer, stroke, Alzheimer's, sensory impairments. It's the trade-off that we made more than 150 years ago when we reduced early age mortality, maternal mortality. We had the privilege of living a long life. And for the first time, we got to see aging. A lot of folks don't realize that experiencing aging or experiencing a long life is last couple of hundred years. Prior to that, most folks died well before the age of 50. We lost a lot of people before the age of 10 from infectious diseases. So we got what we wanted, right? We added 30 years to life on average. We went from 50 to about 80. And so we now have the privilege of a long life, which is ideal in a way, but there was a Faustian trade. And that trade is, the diseases and disorders associated with the biological process of aging. So in the absence of influencing the process of aging, if you push out the envelope of survival longer and longer, you're going to see things you don't want to see or you don't want to experience. And that's really what aging science is now all about, is recognizing the fact that limitations exist and, trying to intervene in the processes that allow us to live healthier longer and enjoy life. I wrote a book about 10 years ago with a colleague of mine called A Measured Breath of Life. It's an iBook. And you could read it in like 30 minutes, or an ebook, I think, we called it. And it explains why it is that, we're only around for a short time period. Humans on average live about 29,000 days. That's it. 29,000 days on average. A dog lives about 5,000 days. A mouse lives about 1,000 days. That is a prescribed duration of life for the species. And now there's a lot of variation around that. We had one human live to 45,000 days, and there's lots of things that we can do to shorten our days, which we do all the time. We smoke cigarettes, we become obese. There's lots of things that we can do to shorten our life. But once you avoid the things that shorten it, then the genetics of longevity come into play, and that's ultimately what influences how long we're capable of living.
One of the things that when we talked before, just prior to a couple of weeks ago for the first time, you had mentioned that as you have over the past 35 plus years, studying in this field and having, interviewed and met with people who are centenarians and what you call super centenarians, I guess, that is there a common element you see with those people who live to 100 plus, or is it just kind of okay?
Yes. Yes. Almost all of them. In fact, I dare to say all of them chose long-lived parents, which is my way of saying there's a strong genetic component to how long you live. And, one of the crazier questions I see in our field is to go ahead and ask a centenarian or super centenarian, what's your secret? It's honestly, it's one of the crazier questions you can ask. It's like asking Michael Jordan, what's your secret to growing 6'7"? And he'll say, I ate macaroni and cheese, kid, right? He has no clue why he grew to 6'7". Well, we know why he grew to 6'7". There's a strong genetic component to height. There's a strong genetic component to duration of life. So you'll get crazy stories from people. One, person will tell you they never got married. The other person will say they got married 6 times. One will say, I don't drink any alcohol. The other will say, I drink alcohol and eat chocolate every day. The bottom line is that their answers have almost nothing to do with why they live that long. And they themselves have almost no clue why they live that long. So I actually wouldn't listen to them for their advice on how to live that long. What I would do is learn a bit more about their ancestors and how long they lived. And chances are, if somebody's already out past 100 or 110, their parents and grandparents probably exceeded average for their birth cohort in terms of longevity. So the forces that are likely to influence radical increases or high life expectancies, let me say, are completely inherited. And there's not much you can do about that, which is why we say choose long-lived parents. If you choose shorter-lived parents, then you better monitor yourself pretty carefully and manufacture as much time as you can with medical technology. Medical technology has really done a remarkable job of manufacturing survival time for people who otherwise would have died much earlier. If you take an entire population of people and you prevent them from having access to medical care, you just let them live their life out with no access to medical care, chances are the average life expectancy would be somewhere in the 60s. Might even be lower. It means that people would die from a burst appendix, from they would go blind, from cataracts. A lot of the things that we can fix now that are very easy to fix were not fixable a couple of centuries ago. So we have much different lives than our ancestors had. It's not necessarily making us live much longer, but it is improving the quality of life. Just by way of illustration, I had my gallbladder removed a couple of years ago. Well, if I hadn't, I would have died from it. I just had some cataracts removed. Now I have close to perfect sight. Imagine 1,000 years ago, people who made it out into their 80s, 90s, and 100 with cataracts and no way to remove them. They were essentially blind. So things that we can fix very easily, it was like a 5-minute procedure. Now they couldn't fix back then. So we've figured out ways of tweaking our bodies so that we can make them last longer. Look, just flossing your teeth is a simple thing that we do on a daily basis that can enhance the functionality of our teeth for a longer time period. Historically, many people died from infections in their mouth, which we can reduce to almost zero today just by careful monitoring. So our world has changed, but the underlying biological process of aging has not, which means as we've pushed ourselves out deeper and deeper into older and older ages, we get to see the consequences of aging. And that process, for now anyway, doesn't stop. And under those conditions, we have to be careful what we wish for. So making it out to 150 isn't what you want unless we can guarantee you're healthy along the way.
Well, I have a rhetorical question for you. If you had the choice between winning that bet, or I'm sorry, you living to 150 and losing that bet with Steve, or you dying young and winning the bet, what would you take?
I would, if I could live to 150 healthy,
Right.
I'll take the 150. It's the healthy part because, there's no question I would not want to live that long. Look, I had this discussion with my father, who was in his mid-90s. He died at 96, but in his mid-90s, he just said to me, "Look, I don't really care how long I live. I just don't want to be in pain. I just want to be healthy, or as healthy as I can be." There's lots of things that you have to change as you get older as an adaptation to the changes in your body. Just by way of illustration, I can't run anymore. I used to be a marathon runner. I could run, but chances are it would trigger a particular problem back that I don't like, which is a normal problem that most people have when they get older, which has to do with the spongy substances that exist between the vertebrae and the spine, which degenerate as you grow older. I used to be 5'7". Now I'm 5'6". And when I have this conversation about height with my grandson, he said, he said, "You're growing shorter faster than I'm growing taller." He said, "We're going to meet in the middle here somewhere." He's only 9 years old. So it's a really fun discussion to have with little ones.
When you're looking up at your grandchildren.
Yeah, well, I'm fine with that.
Okay. So, Jay, how much, now, where does exercise and healthy dietary habits fit into this?
Yeah, so that question comes up all the time, and it's absolutely critical. So remember when I said earlier, flossing your teeth allows your teeth to last for longer? Well, we've learned how to make this body operate more efficiently for a longer time period. And the two main ways in which we know we can do this today, and this applies to people of every age, is through diet and exercise. Actually, I should say exercise and diet. I would begin with the exercise. It's like, just think of it as like an oil, lube, and a filter for your car. Okay. You don't have to do it, but when you do it, it makes your car operate much more efficiently. When you exercise, it enhances the functionality of every part of the body, both body and mind. And so exercise is absolutely critical. The moment people go they go horizontal, especially at later ages, their muscles begin to deteriorate very rapidly. I remember my father, near the end of his life, he was hospitalized and laying horizontal for like 4 or 5 days in a row. And when you're in your mid-90s and you're horizontal, you're not getting up and moving. It's an absolute disaster. There's little chance that you can recover from that. So exercise is foundational to keeping the body and the mind functioning well. Now, let me talk about diet real quickly, because I have a personal example of this. Now, diet, of course, is critical to certainly avoid the things that are unhealthy for us. We know what those are. It's usually excess in anything, whatever that is. It could be just water. Drinking too much water is not actually good for you. So it's pretty much the message that your parents and grandparents told you, which is in everything in moderation, and avoiding the things that make you obese. But let me just tell you one quick story. So I'm 69 years old, and I have some usual normal health issues that you see in your late 60s, one of which, by the way, is systemic inflammation, which is pretty normal. So I decided to conduct an experiment with my doctor, which he went along with. I said, I want to do a blood workup now, and then I'm going to go on a diet called Whole30, WHOLE 30. I'm not, advocating this for everyone. It just worked for me. But it's basically a restricted diet that removes all of the inflammatory foods in your diet. And I said, I want to see what happens to all of my inflammatory markers just 30 days from now. And sure enough, and I just finished this experiment about 2 weeks ago. And sure enough, I went back, did the blood workup after 30 days, and even my doctor was shocked. All of my the C-reactive protein, All of the inflammatory markers in my body declined to near zero. All of my pains, which, when you get into your late 60s, you start to experience some pains, aches and pains. They all disappeared completely. It was absolutely remarkable. It was like, I said to my doctor, I said, it's like being on a steroid when you can reduce this inflammation naturally. Now, Whole30 is not really a diet you could sustain indefinitely. Well, in theory you could, but it's hard to do. But boy, you really feel good, and your body sort of tells you a story of what it is that it likes and what it doesn't like, because you introduce foods back in one at a time, and you figure out what is it that's causing, my sinuses to fill up. What is it that's causing the aches and pains in my knees and my back? And so I figured it out. And so I've altered my diet now, and it's not just the foods that you eat, it's when you eat certain foods that can actually influence your quality of life. The bottom line is diet and exercise are foundational. And these are things that we can do today. In other words, you control what you can control, and they are very powerful forces, especially in the negative way, but also in a positive way, as I just indicated, in what your quality of life is like. And so you begin there. And then, of course, you wait for those of us that are doing work on geroscience, which is an effort to slow biological aging. So in the meantime, you have to use diet and exercise as a way to live long enough until our therapeutic interventions to slow aging come online.
So you said what you eat and when you eat. Can you expand a little bit on what you mean by when you eat it?
Yes. So I'm just going to use me as an example, but it'll be different for everyone. But just by way of illustration, gluten for me is a little bit, I have a sensitivity. I don't have celiacs, but I do have a sensitivity. So if, for example, I eat bread in the evening, I get severe heartburn that night. Heartburn is basically your body's way of telling you you're doing something wrong. And a lot of us don't actually listen to our bodies when they talk to us, but I listen very carefully. When I do get heartburn, it's usually as a result of something I ate, and in this case, when I ate it. It's the same thing with dairy. I can't eat dairy after about 4 or 5 in the afternoon, because if I eat it too late, a lactose intolerance will influence how my body reacts late, and then I have problems sleeping. And then, of course, you get into this negative cascade where once you have a problem sleeping, you have a hard time healing. You feel bad the next day, and it just creates this vicious cycle. The reverse is also true, by the way. Once you improve your sleep, your body heals itself very efficiently, very effectively, and suddenly you feel better. So yeah, it's the kinds of foods that you eat and the time of the day when you eat them that can influence how your body reacts. And it'll be different for everyone. You have to learn when your body reacts negatively to certain foods, and then just avoid it. It's like your body's telling you, yeah, don't do this. I had this discussion with my son not long ago, who was telling me about heartburn that he had. And so his solution was to take an antibiotic. I said, yeah, well, great. That's going to help you right now, but you haven't dealt with the source of the problem. I said, your body just told you that you've done something wrong. Fix it. Figure out what it is that you've done wrong and don't do it again. It's not that complicated. If I run, for example, that is a risk factor for spinal stenosis for me kicking in. So guess what? I don't run anymore. And I haven't had those symptoms from spinal stenosis in a long time. You learn what the risk factors are and you avoid those negative risk factors. It's not rocket science, by the way.
No. I have a gluten intolerance and a dairy intolerance as well. So I primarily cut bread right out. I would find when I would eat bread, I would almost feel like I was choking. Or when I eat dairy later in the afternoon or in the evening, like I had a bowl of ice cream when I was younger, I would have a really difficult time breathing. And I never understood why. And well, it's a funny story last night, Jay. Melissa and I like to have a bowl of ice cream 1 or 2 nights a week when I'm visiting her. And so she picked me up some oat milk yesterday, or oat milk ice cream. And We put a little scoop of her ice cream on the counter for the cat. So I put a little scoop of my ice cream on the counter for the cat, my oat milk ice cream. We watched an entire episode of Succession, which is an hour long, the TV show Succession. And at the end of the episode, my ice cream was still there and hadn't melted on the counter. So I don't know what the hell's in that ice cream. There must be some plastic in that ice cream. So
yeah, well, actually, let me amplify one thing here. So I want to emphasize that when we're talking about diet in particular, I do not recommend and I do not personally follow a set of dietary constraints that completely eliminate the things that I like in the way, in the food that I eat. So I like French fries.
I do too.
I love them. I just don't eat them very often, and I certainly never eat them at night. I love ice cream. Even at night, if I want some, I can go have a tablespoon full. That's okay. My body says, yeah, Jay, I'll let you get away with having a tablespoonful. I'll leave you alone, but no more than that. And so deprivation is not the way in which I operate. It's just being cautious and minimizing risk. That's all it is.
I love that. I'm a fry guy too. I love French fries, just love them. But you have a much more discipline than I do. I don't think there's any way in hell I could have a teaspoon or a tablespoon of ice cream. And by the time that freezer opens up, I'm going for a bowl of ice cream. So, the question for you on the longevity and aging, where do you put supplements? I know I have literally, I brought it with me today, and I have a little tackle box. So when I travel, I carry it around. It's got 13 different things that I take. One of them is my allergy pill. One is aspirin, but I take B12, berberine, blood builder, D3, metformin, multivitamin K2, and zinc. I'm really curious, and I don't know how much you can actually share because I know you guys are still doing a great deal of research on metformin, but I'm the kind of guy that if I hear something on a podcast or read it in a book, I'll explore it more, and I'll just say, I'll try it. And I don't know.
Well, there's your mistake right there. Okay. Let's stop.
I knew you were going to say that.
I want to stop right there.
I knew it.
So, look, there have been claims that have been made for a very long time, thousands of years, that we've discovered some new secret, something new that is valuable. And then somebody comes along and says, okay, I'm going to try it. Well, guess what? You are conducting a biological experiment on your own body. You should never, ever use your body as an experimental subject. And that's exactly what you've done. You have no clue what the effects of metformin will be on your body. You probably have no clue what the vast majority of the supplements you're putting in your body will have on your functioning. We know that we can obtain all or almost all of the nutrients that we need through the food that we eat. And that is all that we need to survive and live a long and healthy life. Now, there are exceptions to that rule. We've learned, for example, that there are some normal changes that occur as we get older, for example, associated with vitamin D. And our bodies are less able to transform sunlight into vitamin D, which is where you get most of your vitamin D. And so sometimes a vitamin D supplement is encouraged. I actually take a vitamin D supplement. It's had a pretty important effect. And of course I can measure it, through the blood test. And pregnant women, for example, we've learned that certain supplements can, enhance the health and quality of life of the baby. But for the vast majority of the population that is taking supplements, they are doing nothing more than creating expensive urine. You probably could package up your urine and sell it, because that's where the vast majority of those supplements are going. And if they're fat-soluble vitamins like A, D, E, and K, if you're taking too much of it, it can be harmful. Your body will accumulate it. And so I have to discourage everyone from doing experiments on their own body. Back in 1980, there was a discovery made by a physician in Milwaukee by the name of Daniel Rudman, where he injected growth hormone into individuals, claiming that it was the loss of growth hormone that was causing aging. So all you have to do is restore these hormone levels to youthful levels that existed when you were younger, and you could restore youthfulness. Well, growth hormone does indeed have an influence on muscle mass, most likely by increasing the amount of water that's accumulated in the muscle. But it was later and by the way, people started injecting themselves with growth hormone or getting their doctors to prescribe it. You had to get a prescription for that metformin. I assume you're not pre-diabetic.
Nope.
I may be wrong, but
no, I'm not.
If you're taking metformin and you're thinking that it's going to have some influence on aging, it might. It's just that the science is not in yet to tell us whether or not it's safe and efficacious. What you're doing, no offense, I'm coming down hard on you, but
that's okay. Everybody else does.
But it's like when the tests were being done on the COVID vaccine, it's like saying, give it to me first before the tests are done. I want to see if it works. Well, goodness, that's the last thing you want to do is be the experimental subject. You want to wait until the science comes in that tells you, first and foremost, whether or not it's safe. And then the word we use is efficacious to describe whether or not it actually does anything. And so the chances are that the vast majority of what you're putting in your body is probably useless, potentially harmful. You're certainly conducting an experiment on yourself, and you're not the only one. People all across the United States, the globe, are doing experiments on themselves using nutritional supplements and other things that they have been told may influence their aging, may make them feel better. There's a very strong placebo effect for many of these. So I'm just urging extreme caution. It doesn't mean that there isn't a place for it under the right conditions. There is, absolutely. I think you would do an experiment on your own body.
Well, I didn't want to ask you that question, and the reason was I knew you were going to give me that answer. But I'm glad I did. And the thing is, I think you just saved me about $340 a month too. But I wanted to argue. I'll be the argue back, Doctor or Professor. I heard it on a podcast. It must be right.
Yeah, right. Look. I could show you multiple books sold by plenty of people that are claiming all kinds of benefits associated with either nutritional supplements or hormones or whatever. And you have to keep in mind, I refer to this industry, those that are selling these products with claims that they're going to make you healthier or live longer. I refer to that as the second oldest profession. It's called anti-aging medicine. I put medicine in quotes because there isn't really any medicine in there. People are trying to separate you from your money. And they're selling you the one thing that you want the most, which is life. And especially healthy life. Healthy life is perhaps one of the most precious commodities that exists on earth. So people are willing to open their pocketbook in exchange for what people are telling them is life or healthy life. And, almost without exception, they're selling you a bill of goods. It's been called snake oil. Again, go to the first chapter of my book where I describe this history going back several thousand years. It's an old story, and it might even be the oldest profession. I'm not sure, but if it's not the oldest, it's the second oldest profession that exists. And it's stronger today than it's ever been because people can buy this stuff over the internet. And you have no clue, by the way, what is in what you are eating, especially if it comes from other countries. The last thing I would do is buy supplements from China, for example. We have no clue what's in there. I don't know I assume your metformin is a prescription, yes?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. And your doctor, what'd you do? Just ask your doctor, prescribe metformin for me?
Yeah, pretty much. Answered a few questions, and I was, okay, it's coming. It'll be delivered to you. No, here's what I did, Professor Dr. J, Dr. J, I love that, is I got online, maybe this is how naive I was, and found hey, I'm metformin, typed it in, and doctors, you can type in answer a few questions, and you qualify or don't qualify. My assumption is 99% of people qualify for it, and they shipped it to me in the mail.
Yeah, of course. And where's it made? Do you know where it's manufactured?
I don't know because I don't have my bottle with me, because I just have my tackle box with me with the pills in each container.
Yeah, I would definitely look at where it's manufactured, because if it's coming from, I actually don't know the exact source, but I would be extremely cautious depending on where it's coming from, because once they look at these substances that are mailed out, it is often the case that it actually doesn't have any of what they claim is in there, or it's in quantities that that aren't necessarily what you should be taking or what they claim you should be taking, and who knows what else they put in there. So the last thing I would do is put things into my body that come through the mail, unless I know with certainty what the source is and it's a trusted source. So again, once you learn about this industry and the folks that are out there is trying to separate you from your money and to try to convince you that what they're selling will manufacture what you desire most, which is life, or healthy life. Just be cautious.
Well, I can tell you're going to make Melissa, my better half, smile, because she's a nurse. And when I told her I was on metformin, she looked at me like, "Why are you on that? You're not pre-diabetic." I said, "All this research, podcast, this doctor," and she's like, "I don't know."
There may come a time when metformin is validated as a safe and efficacious intervention for multiple disease endpoints. We don't know yet. There are clinical trials that are either underway or about to get underway to test this. But until then, we don't know. Now, if you were pre-diabetic or diabetic, that's a different story. Then metformin has been shown to be very effective. Just like statins, for example, have been shown to be very effective in dealing with hyperlipidemia and the cardiovascular risk factors. I mean, it's pretty remarkable. If you don't intervene in heart disease, people will die early. They'll die in their 50s, 60s, and 70s. When you intervene with blood pressure medication or statins, for example, you return survival prospects back to normal. So I'm not saying that the medical technology doesn't work. In fact, it works beautifully. It's absolutely remarkable. But you only stick with what has been approved by the FDA. They have to be tested for safety and efficacy. And, again, do not conduct experiments on your own body. You might be tempted to conduct an experiment on someone else's body, but definitely don't do it on your own.
Well, your advice is going to be heeded or it'll be taken, because I've always wondered, and I thought, am I just spending a few $100s a month on really good urine? And I didn't really think about the harm it could do. I just thought about, like you said, the efficacy of it, that whether it's even helping or not. There are I do take an aspirin a day, and and of course my allergy pill I take every day. But the rest of this is just stuff I've heard is good for you.
Yeah, I mean, why not just take that few $100 and buy good quality food?
I do eat well. That's one thing I do. I'm a pretty good eater, other than my oat milk ice cream last night. and I think it was Sunday night, Jay. I didn't have any ice cream, but I eat really well. Like I eat natural foods, and I make the shakes that I need to make with kale and blah 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 blah. But when I go off, oh man, I go off. I'll eat 12 Reese cups, the little tiny baby Reese cups. I'll eat 12 of those watching a TV show every few weeks. Like I don't have that discipline of that 1 teaspoon of ice cream. And there's no way. I don't have it.
Yeah, you wouldn't do that. You wouldn't do that on Whole30. On Whole30, you take all the sugar out of your diet completely. And boy, if you want to experience a shock, pull all the sugar out of your diet. And most people who go on Whole30 will have a headache after about 2 days, and then it goes away, a day later. But then once you pull sugar out, and then you start eating foods that have natural sugar, like fruit, eating a raspberry or a blueberry is a totally new experience, because your body is no longer desensitized to sugar, and suddenly the fruits that you're eating taste much sweeter. The flavor is much more enhanced when you remove sugar from your diet. I actually, since I stopped Whole30 about 2 weeks ago, I still don't eat any sugar. And I'm pretty sure it's one of the reasons why I feel so good. Still no more aches, no aches and pains. And I'm losing weight as a result, by the way. So earlier I would have small amounts. Right now I'm not having any. No. And I do still eat chocolate, but I eat 100% cocoa.
Yeah.
So I just get the flavor without any of the sugar.
I'm going to Google the Whole30 diet. I'm just going to check it out. I mean, I don't eat candy bars. I don't drink soda or pop. I just never have. The only really my weakness is ice cream. And I can go months without having it. But when I do, I'll go 2 weeks with having it 3 nights a week, and chocolate chip cookies. And when those are around, they're magnetic to me, man. And I'm drawn. And I always think, well, I kind of went off my eating habit today. I might as well just go way off and come back tomorrow morning. That's my problem. I'll go 3-4 weeks and just eat just perfectly. But then I'll get that one night where, I become an extremist.
Yeah. Well, look, I mean, if you have a choice of ingesting foods that are unhealthy for you on a daily basis, or eating healthy, 29 out of 30 days a month, and you treat yourself on that one day, there's nothing wrong with that at all. It's like, way back in my younger days when I was trying to lose weight, I would watch very carefully what I ate every day, and then on Friday night I would treat myself to a scoop of Haagen-Dazs ice cream. Haagen-Dazs has very few ingredients in it, none of the artificial stuff that you see in lots of other ice creams. And my best weight loss days were the day after I treated myself. So yeah, I mean, you do have to be nice to yourself, even when you're being cautious. It's okay to I wouldn't say go off. I would just say you're just being nice to yourself. You're just treating yourself.
I like a little reward.
Yeah. A reward. There you go.
I like the way that sounds. I want to share a real quick story that's coincidental. Then I want to talk about the infectious disease model for a minute, and then before we wrap up, Jay. But after I had spoken with you 2 weeks ago, I was talking with a client, and he was telling me, and he didn't even know anything about me having talked with you. He was talking about a lady he knew in Bath, Michigan, which is only maybe 20 miles from where I am right now. She died in 2022, May 1st. She lived to 114 years old. Her name was Irene Dunham, and so I Googled it and pulled up her article. She was born December 16th in 1907, died May 1st of 2022, and I thought, wow, what a coincidence. The day that I spoke with you, or the next day, talking with the client, he was bringing up to say she was a friend of this gentleman's family. And when I read her obituary, I read some things about her, because there was obviously multiple articles written on her local newspaper. She said, every year I love seeing the flowers come up. And that was kind of her motivation for continuing on. And I just don't worry about things. I just thought it was so cool. She actually was one of the few. There were, back in the turn of the last century, back maybe 1920, somewhere in there, there was the largest school killing I think in the history of the United States was in Bath, Michigan, where I believe it was a janitor blew up the school and killed 44 people. I think 41 children and 3 adults or something like that. She didn't go to school that day because she had a sore throat, and she survived that. So she was one of the 2 survivors of the Bath Massacre, they call it. But I thought, what a coincidence that, you and I had just spoken, and this gentleman brings up this Irene Dunham. And if you ever get a chance to Google her, that's her name. She lived for 114 years. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so I watched the National Geographic special. I think it's called Age of Aging. Narrated by Ron Howard, and I found it fascinating. As like I said, I've watched it twice so far. And in there, you talk about the infectious disease model, I believe it is, how we've focused in the past on one disease at a time. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah. So way back a little over a century ago, we had very high death rates from infectious and parasitic diseases. We lost a lot of children. In some parts of the world, the birth rates were much higher. We would lose anywhere from 20 to 30, sometimes 40% of the babies would die before their first birthday. And they would die from today, what today we would easily treat or prevent with vaccines or, other interventions that allow us to avoid early mortality. But so the infectious disease model. So anytime anybody had an infectious disease, you would treat that disease. It's pretty much the way in which we operate today. If you have cancer, you go to an oncologist. They treat the cancer. If you have heart disease, you go to a cardiologist, and they will treat the heart disease. The National Institutes of Health was constructed based on this siloed approach of going after one disease at a time. It made sense, of course. Somebody had a particular infectious disease like polio. Well, you either treat it or prevent it. And you don't really think about anything else because the person has one particular health challenge. So that in and of itself is called the infectious disease model. It made perfect sense. It's logical. And I understand why we did that more than 100 years ago. So fast forward to today, right? The infectious disease model worked. We brought in public health. We dramatically reduced early age mortality. We allowed most people to survive beyond the age of 65. In today's world, we get to experience aging for the first time. So now we have heart disease, cancer, stroke, Alzheimer's, all the stuff that goes wrong in older bodies. No surprise there. But what we have done is we have taken that centuries-old infectious disease model and applied it to the chronic fatal diseases and non-fatal diseases that we see today. Makes sense. I get it. I get why modern medicine did that, right? So you have a heart problem, you go see a heart specialist. Same with cancer, same with all of these other problems that we have, and we go see specialists. Mm-hmm. The thing is that this infectious disease model, when applied to chronic fatal diseases, is and has been, is in the future, I'm not saying this correctly, will in the future and is now having a diminishing effect on length and quality of life. In other words, when you save a baby from dying or a child from dying from an infectious disease, you are adding decades to life. They get an opportunity to live a long life. But when you save somebody in their 70s, 80s, and 90s, and I'm not saying we shouldn't be doing that. I'm just saying when you save the life of older individuals, you manufacture much less survival time because the underlying biological process of aging is marching on in the background, which is ultimately influencing the survival of those individuals. So, the longer we live, the older we are, the less effective this disease model will be. In other words, diseases cluster in older bodies, and the older we get, the more close together they cluster. This is called competing risks in epidemiology. It's just another way of saying, the older you get, the more things you have that can go wrong with you. That's all that is. There shouldn't be any surprise there. If you open up the body of somebody in their 90s or 100, there's probably going to be a half a dozen things that are going wrong that could lead to death in that individual, and you don't really know what they are. Many of them are symptomatic, until death eventually occurs. So what we have developed in the world of aging science today is an alternative to this this disease model, this one disease that it's called. I just refer to it as a game of whack-a-mole, right? You knock one thing down and three things come back up, right? So this game of whack-a-mole is something that we want to stop playing. And now we want to go after the underlying biological process of aging that's giving rise to all of these diseases. This is called geroscience. This is a new public health movement that has been initiated really just within the last 10 to 15 years, and it's taken off pretty dramatically, I would say, just within the last 5 years with very large investments in efforts to slow biological aging. On a practical level, what it means for people is that we're searching for something that has the potential to slow everything down that we don't like about aging, to delay it, to compress it into a shorter duration of time near the end of life so that we are healthier for a longer time period. And there is reason to believe that we will be successful. Now, this brings me back to metformin. Metformin is one of the compounds that researchers are beginning to test. We think it may have properties that slow down the biological process of aging. I wouldn't take it yet because we haven't tested it for safety and efficacy, but there is evidence to suggest that it could work. And there's multiple other interventions that researchers are now beginning to test and explore that allow us, that we think have the potential to slow biological aging. So it's really a movement away from, or a supplement to, the disease model, to one where we're going after the underlying process of aging that's marching on beneath the surface in all of us. And the older we get, the more important that that aging model becomes. So that's the short answer, by the way.
So this is turning the standard public health on its head. Really, it's a whole new form of public health.
Yes, it is what I call primary prevention with a capital P. It is really what public health should be all about. It's doing what we need to do to enhance and extend the quality of our lives. It's what we're not getting from diet and exercise. Diet and exercise are helping us now, as much as possible to get us out as long as possible, as healthy as possible. But aging is still happening, even with diet and exercise. So we're going after the one thing that diet and exercise isn't working on, which is aging. And just imagine being 80 years old in the body of a 50-year-old, or being 90 years old in the body of a 60-year-old. That's what we're talking about here. And this intervention, or multiple interventions when they happen, that's what they're going to achieve. They're going to achieve an extension of the period of healthy life. It will transform society. It will transform what it means to grow old. I testified before Congress on this issue. I don't know if you saw that video. It was last September. And Congress wanted to know about this world of geroscience that we're working on. And, we're happy to basically give them an update, which really wasn't far different than what I've just told all of your listeners. It's all the story of what we can and cannot do, and why there's a logic and a rationale for why we need to pursue this new mode of public, going after aging itself. So that's what that is all about. And I'm really excited about it. And in all likelihood, I've been working in this field for close to 40 years. When all said and done, I don't know when my career is going to be over, but when it is, I'm hoping that this will be the most important contribution I've made in my lifetime.
Honestly, I can't imagine a bigger contribution to be made to the society and to the human race and overall. I mean, this is game-changing stuff. I can't wait to text Melissa and say, you were right. I might as well get that out of the way right away. I really like the fact that, you had mentioned what I kind of got out of this, and I've got 2.5, almost 3 pages of notes here, actually, is genetics plays a major role. Choosing long-lived parents. So that long-lived parents is obviously a big, major factor, but also we have some, which is biological. We also have some behavioral things we can do, which exercise is foundational, diet is critical. And what I liked what you said is that we can get the vast majority of the nutrients we want and need from the foods we eat. So the supplements they're not necessarily always necessary. In fact, they can be potentially harmful. And that's going to make me change and look at, I know I eat right, but I don't necessarily always look at, what nutrients do I need, what vitamins, minerals, and where am I getting it from what I eat? Because I always thought, I'm getting a lot from the supplements I take, so I can skip a little bit on the foods and things that, even though I do eat a lot of cake. I eat a lot of the things that I hear are good for you, without a ton of research on my end. In fact, very little research on my end, to be honest with you. So you've opened my eyes a lot today, Jay, and I really appreciate that a great deal. I know you're busy. I know you just flew back from Boston, yesterday?
Yes.
And you had a conference out there, and I know you're busy this afternoon, so I'm not going to keep you much longer. Is there any final words you'd like to leave with myself and the Bamboo Pack audience?
Goodness. I would learn a bit more about this world of geroscience and where this is all headed, because this will change your life. It will change the life of your children. It is a new public health initiative, nothing like we've ever seen before. And trying to get the general public to understand what is happening is very difficult. And there's a lot of misinformation out there. Some of the objections to what we're doing. Some people will suggest you're going to ruin Social Security because we're going to produce all these old people. And our response is, well, look, what's the alternative? The alternative is you're going to produce a lot of unhealthy old people. We want to produce a lot of healthy old people. Which would you rather have? And by the way, you're going to be one of them. So you have the choice of which one you're going to have. So I would learn more about what's going on in the world of neuroscience. There's a lot to be excited about. It will be transformative. In the meantime, do what you can to control your health and quality of life. Listen to your body. It's talking to you all the time. We don't listen. We we take pills instead of listening. To deal with the problems that our body's telling us. These are messages I already got across, but I'm re-emphasizing them because they are important. And then again, do not experiment on yourself. I don't know what to tell you about the metformin, but I would be cautious.
I think you were very straightforward on that one.
Yeah.
There wasn't a lot of room for a wiggle room on that one. And I appreciate that a great deal. One of the, I guess the last thing I'll say is, and I've only said this to a few guests, and this has come from a very authentic viewpoint, is, I'm so grateful that there are people out there who have devoted their lives to what you're doing, because, we all make a difference in the world, and everybody has the potential to impact not only, the people around them, family, friends, and community, but the world as a whole. But I think the field you have dedicated your life to, Jay, has, I mean, quite frankly, it can change the entire human race and it's a building block for so many other things that we can accomplish down the road. If we can live to 130, 150, maybe sometime down the road, and you lose that bet, maybe, and we're living healthier lives where we're contributing to society, we're producing and creating it at a much older age. I mean, quite frankly, that's our most productive years can be maybe beyond 70 or 80 because we have so much wisdom and experience to share. I mean, that to me is an incredible global changer. So I just want to take the time to thank you for not only being an amazing guest today on the show, but also for the dedication from basically 24 years on until 69 and beyond of what you've committed your life journey to. So thank you for that.
Yeah, I appreciated that. And you probably touched on the one thing I didn't mention, which I should have. You did a pretty good job here when you're talking about the value of healthy older life, perhaps one of the most precious commodities we have. I mean, in addition to manufacturing healthy life, are older people. I know there's a tendency to look at older people as in association with loss and decline and decay and expensive medical costs. Yeah, well, guess what? When you have healthy older people, you have one of the most precious commodities in a country. And understanding and valuing individuals as they grow older, I think, is something we need to learn how to do much more effectively. Some parts of the world have done it. We certainly have not done it here in the United States, and recognizing the value of older individuals is critical. So thanks for raising that to end the discussion.
Oh, you are quite welcome. So, Professor Olshansky, I know we're going to talk for a minute or two after we wrap up here, but I just want to, again, thank you for coming on the show. I know you're busy, taking time from your busy schedule. I know we're going to get a lot of letters and emails and texts regarding this episode. So appreciate everything you're doing, and I appreciate your time today.
Thanks for having me.
It's my pleasure. All right, Bamboo Pack out there, please. I love if you're running, walking, driving, or, walking around your office, your home, and listening to this, please sit down and listen to it a second time with a notepad and paper and really, pull up the transcripts from today's episode and really listen to what Jay shared with us today. This is, I mean, I'm perplexed by this field. It's beyond my realm of understanding fully, but to me, it's just so incredibly fascinating. So please do that. Please also hit the like button, share with 3 people, rate us, review us, good or bad, and let me know what you thought about today's episode. In the meantime, I'll talk to you in a week. In the meantime, please get out there and give your best. Please strive to be and give your best in life. Please show love and understanding and respect to others, and also please live intentionally. I appreciate each and every one of you. Bye-bye.